All right, so I want to start with introducing the first panel here, and we're getting right into payment trends in 2020. And we have our moderator, Zachary Aaron, Principal, Deloitte Consulting. Welcome, Zachary. Tony McLaughlin, Managing Director, Emerging Payments with Citibank. Tony, you can raise your hand so everyone knows who you are. David Talek, GM Payments of Square. Welcome, David. And Peggy Alford, Senior Vice President of Core Markets with PayPal. So enjoy your first panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Excellent. Thank you, Cleveland. Good morning, everyone. I think we have a very exciting, interesting conversation to begin our Wednesday morning, last morning here at Money2020. So thanks everyone for showing up after what I assume was a very calm, stressful, relaxed, not a busy Tuesday night. Great panel today. We have Peggy, David, and Tony, and what we really want to talk about are some of the payment trends that we expect to be seeing over the course of the next 12 months, what they mean for folks in the payment space, and what are some of the potential strategies. So David, let's start with you. And let's first start talking about where we sort of see the change in the value of payments, both economic value, but just overall how payments means to the kind of overall ecosystem. And I think the story of Square and thinking about where Square has come from, starting with mobile POS to now all the diversification of the services that it provides now. How have you seen payments really drive sort of the evolution of your strategy and drive, how you've kind of thought about your product choices and the ways you want to support your customers?
Yep. Good morning, and thanks everyone for showing up this early. To the question of diversification, Square started as largely a payments company. And I think diversification is important because simply being good at one thing is a great starting point, but it's not necessarily a durable strategy. And I think that window will eventually close with time. And so even diversification, though, I feel like that word itself and that mental model is somewhat flawed because moving from a singular product to a suite of standalone products seems like the compelling next thing to do. But even that window of opportunity will close. And so the way that I would frame the question, the way that I look at our product suite is less about diversification of standalone products and more about the word is cohesion of experiences of logical, not products, but logical jobs that consumers or sellers seek to achieve. And so that's really like, using a concrete example of applying that thought process, you look at just the Square product suite. Payments is a great acquisition channel, a great acquisition product for us. People will come to us, they get beautiful hardware, they get beautiful payments, but then they add an item, and next thing you know, it's a point of sale software. They add an employee, it starts to become, team management. They do time cards, and then we say, did you know you can run payroll? You can actually then push the funds to an instant deposit, push it to a bank account, spend the net proceeds on a stored, Square card, debit card. Mm-hmm. And with all of that, we also allow folks to be able to have access to working capital because we obviously can see how this entire ecosystem fits together. So again, I think that the TLDR, the takeaway is standalone products, great starting point, not a durable thing. And then even diversification is a good stepping stone, but ultimately you need to get to a cohesive thing that doesn't feel like standalone products, but blurs together into one experience that a company provides. And that's, I think, much of the success that we found.
And Peggy, I think I hear David talk about that, sort of the aspect of cohesion, but also around customer experiences. And PayPal as well has evolved significantly over the years. And how has PayPal adapted a little bit to the shifts around kind of the payments value chain and really try to take advantage of being cohesive and also continue to advance and adapt the way customer preferences have changed?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with the themes that David laid out in that I think where we're moving moving from is the desire to sort of have a payment solution to one that is about supporting the entire commerce journey. And so, if you think about where PayPal focused in the past, it was very much around the checkout and, creating a sort of seamless checkout that enabled all types of businesses to be able to support an online presence. And what we've seen is that our customers are actually asking us to move more to something that enables them to manage their entire commerce journey. And so we've focused a lot both on the development side as well as on the acquisition side to really be able to support that journey. And so everything from demand gen, where businesses really need us to help them generate more customer eyeballs and more customer demand, to risk and fraud through our Simility acquisition, to iZettle, which enables a POS type solution, to payouts with our Hyperwallet acquisition, and then obviously continuing to expand and deepen our credit offerings on both the consumer side and the merchant side. And on the consumer side, consumers really want flexibility in how to pay. And so our focus in terms of our credit offerings have been around, everything from creating a seamless experience to pay now when you check out to anything, to all the way to a line of credit. And everything in between. And on the merchant side, being able to use the data that we have around our customers to give them access to capital that they may not have been able to get from a traditional banking system, and be able to enable them to pay back as they generate sales. So that flexibility of how to pay back. And so there's just a real desire for us to really help them with the entire journey, and that's been an evolution for us.
Excellent. Tony, let me sort of pivot the question your way, and having observed this space evolve over time. I mean, we've all been in payments for a long time, and we used to talk about the value of payments being how fast can I move money from A to B, and it was all about, if you will, just the movement, which is still really important. We hear David and Peggy talk, though, a lot about different ways of value of payments. And so I guess question over to you is, where do you see the opportunities? Do you feel like the aspect of payment processing has become more commoditized, but now there's opportunities to use that to drive value in other areas? What do you see from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity is truly unlimited because the digital economy has barely begun. There's a McKinsey study that says some $65 trillion worth of economic activity will resolve into platforms. And the question is, what will be the financial layer of that world of platforms? And that's going to be a great ecosystem for banks, fintechs, and big techs to provide that financial layer. And the opportunities are truly limitless. And I'll just give one small example. Any platform can become an investment platform. And what I mean by that, just think about this in a low interest rate environment, right? When people are struggling to get return on their savings accounts, if we could have a platform that enabled us to invest in Netflix original content or Amazon Prime original content, or if we could invest as individuals in helping that Uber driver buy a new electric vehicle, or in Airbnb providing finance to a host who wants to upgrade their property. Any platform can be a finance platform. I think we're seeing that in China already with Ant Financial and Alibaba. So the question is this, Ant Financial does total financial intermediation of the Alibaba ecosystem, lending, FX, insurance, wealth management. There's a world of platforms, a world of opportunity for banks, fintechs, and big techs to provide those financial services.
Agreed. And it's interesting you bring up the point on platforms, and Peggy, maybe over to you, is with all of, if you think about the platform and hearing all the different types of products, services, and opportunities that you can provide, that now speaks to integration. And it speaks to a lot of investment that has to be made because now you're supporting almost an anytime, anywhere type of an environment. But with that, though, comes a lot of challenges. One of the things that we think we're going to be seeing out there is a greater push for standards to help say, how do we integrate? How are we able to provide services and be able to really plug and play them in a pretty seamless manner? What's your take on, do you think we're going to see the industry really push for bigger standards? I mean, not just, ISO 20022 and a couple of things that have come out, but just a stronger push overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a trend that we're moving fastly towards because it's necessary for systems to work together and for us to have systems that talk to each other in a seamless way. Because the desire ultimately is that payments becomes invisible.
Right.
And that we're able to support a global economy and borders that are becoming more and more gray and non-existent, where the world is operating together rather than in individual pieces. And so we're already obviously starting to see it with SEPA in Europe. We're seeing it in Southeast Asia with the systems starting, having a standard of the systems talking to each other. And there's just going to be more of that because it's going to be necessary in order for us to support what consumers and businesses need to operate globally.
Do you see? Do you guys? How do you see the role of all the entities and payments driving those standards?
I mean, I think that as businesses become more and more global, and I think it's been really fun to see our customers expand globally and want to work in multiple countries. But with that adds a lot of complexity, both on on the system side and on the sort of regulatory complexity that exists separately in each country that hopefully will become more standardized as we move. But in the meantime, they are looking for the payment companies to provide that expertise, to provide that infrastructure so that they can focus on their core business. And so a lot of our focus has been enabling our businesses to look to us to take the complexity out of expansion and the complexity out of growing their business across the globe.
David, I think Square last year started to undertake a similar journey around opening up your platform for third-party developers.
Yep.
How much of that was done in response to how to overall can Square improve the customer experience?
Yep.
How much of that was to take advantage of delivering new services, as we've talked about on the platform? And how much of that has been driven by the need to say, I also need to simplify things and create an easier layer, an easier ability to set some standards of how I want to deliver my services out into the marketplace?
Yeah, so we're multiple years into our platform journey in the making. The place that I would start is, we start with first-party experiences. So we started as a payments company. We obviously built out a lot of the first-party suite that I mentioned earlier. And we continue to prioritize the first-party experience to create a beautiful solution for our sellers. The acquisition of Weebly was to recognize that from a first-party perspective, we could be better about solving the omni-channel requirements or omni-channel dilemma, if you will, for our sellers. But we also realize that as much as we invest into our first-party products and as beautiful and as simple and as cohesive as we make them, to have the humility to know that we can't do everything for everyone. And whether it's building an extensible product suite or whether it's meeting our sellers where they are, allowing them to use their existing WordPress site, or allowing them to integrate the data into their broader system, we have to invest into platform. So it is something that we take very seriously. What we have is we believe that regardless of a first-party experience, regardless of whether it's in-store or online or across a partner surface, we believe from a technical nature that you should be able to data model or create a data object of a customer, an employee, an item, an order, a payment. Yeah. And our sellers should be able to see those things transact across multiple services, across multiple first-party products and multiple third-party products. And so we'd like to have a world where a seller can use their existing WordPress site. They don't have to use Square Online Store. They can use the WooCommerce partner integration. They can use our beautiful in-store devices and experiences, and that all flows seamless together. So platform is a top of mind for us, so much so that every time we build new first-party experiences, it's fundamentally built on top of the capability of the platform. Okay. So we're actually moving towards, instead of being first-party first, platform first, and then actually building our own first-party experiences on top of the platform, and then democratizing access to those RESTful resources to all of our partners.
Interesting. So Tony, back to you. You talk about the platform discussion. We talk a little bit about standards. I think this also opens up a door or a Pandora's box into into a related topic around digital ID.
Yeah.
And so as we talk about, how do you create a platform like David and Square are doing, that Peggy and PayPal are doing, you start to think about, okay, now I need to have the ability to interact across different products. I need to have the ability to, potentially interact in a cross-border manner. And so now we start looking into areas around ID. And so wanted to get your thoughts as someone that's been, very, speaks a lot on this topic with a lot of eminence around. Where do you see the evolution of digital ID happening?
Yeah.
Is it going to be driven out from these platforms as sort of one of the new standards, or is it something that's going to have to be incorporated by the folks that are making these platforms?
Yeah, so let's look at the countries that have made the most progress in digitizing payments. The two countries I would pick out would be India and Sweden. So the base of what they call the India stack is Aadhaar, the digital ID. It's a national ID. Now, in some countries like the UK and the US, we don't like the idea of national ID. So I would also look at the Swedish model. So in Sweden, they have the bank ID, the federated bank ID. Sweden is almost a cashless society. And one thing that facilitates that, they have this great app called Swish, but the authentication of those transactions, the authorization takes place at the bank ID layer. Okay. Now let's then think about this country. I think I'm right in saying the statistic is the US is 25% of global card volumes and 50% of fraud. And the reason is because you don't have an identity infrastructure in this country.
Yeah.
And the base of what we call the fiat currency stack, the way of us fixing payments. There's a great book that I can recommend to everyone. It's by David Birch. It's called Identity is the New Money. And what he argues is that payments equals identity plus accounting entries. And the accounting entries are the easy part. So look, if we want to fix payments for society, then you have to address the base layer, and the base layer is digital ID. Yeah. Now, the best model I think of that for this country is a consortium of banks, telcos, big techs, fintechs, and look at the example of It's Me in Belgium. So it's a federated bank ID scheme. If you have that in this country, I believe, and there are other studies out there, you could grow GDP by 3%. Because that ID is not just for banking transactions, that ID is for government transactions, central and local, and it's for interacting with any digital service. So please look at bank ID in Sweden, digital ID in Belgium, and look at the state of payments in the US, because I'm sorry, and it's bad to kind of like insult your hosts, but this is an emerging market when it comes to the payments business.
Yeah. Yeah. Candidly, we followed this space, we've all followed this space a long time. You see so many other things happening outside the U.S., to your point. Amazing levels of innovation we see all throughout. I think about ID, to your comment. Think about what progress Estonia has made, as an example. David, Peggy, hearing Tony's comments around digital ID and how it drives this, what's your guys' point of view? Is this something that you think is going to be moving to the top of the conversation this year? Is it things that we're still sort of dipping our toe in the water?
I resonates with me on a personal front. In my scope, I manage the global risk organization and compliance engineering, and as well as the payment stack. And I found myself nodding violently over here like a bobblehead in terms of your commentary. There's a lot of unnecessary, artificial, unnatural things that we have to do given the data and the structure that we have here in the United States, and I think there's a lot of room for progress. And I actually, to some degree, in just hearing you speak, wish more of the dialogue would shift to underwriting, would shift to identity. I think there's more discussion and more time that needs to be spent there, and the ramifications of what that could unlock across the broader payment stack is probably a conversation that we're not having often enough. So resonates loudly.
I agree, and I would just add that I think that what it'll require in the U.S. is a real look at building new infrastructure, because I think the benefit that some of the other parts of the world have is that they were able to build from scratch, thinking about identity at its core.
Absolutely.
And so it almost requires that we do a lot of rebuilding rather than the ability to build from scratch, which is always, it's more complicated.
More complex.
So,
sure.
But I completely agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel, is the driver going to be also, in your opinion, Tony, around this, what is the main driver? Is it going to be around how do we become more inclusive in terms of enabling more people to participate in the financial system? Is it more about just efficiencies of how we're able to transact? Or is it truly about fixing core underlying challenges we have with payments?
You know, what it is there's a disconnect between the 21st century commerce, which is digital, online, 24/7, and frankly, a kind of clockwork banking system, which is still built on batch processes and storing forward messages. And so, you know, really the way I see it is that payments needs to be fixed. There are, you know, the critique that comes from the crypto industry, there's two critiques. One is ideological. You know, we hate centralized authority, no banks, no intermediaries, no central banks. That's an ideological critique, but there's also a performance critique. And so I think we as the payments industry, we have to address the performance critique. And some of the remedies that are being proposed, to me, are wrong-headed. I mean, for example, if we're thinking about essentially the tokenization of the financial system, to me, that's a return to a world of bearer instruments. And bearer instruments are very dangerous from a financial crime perspective and very inefficient from a key management perspective. So really, you know, for most of my 27 years in payments, it's not been a cool subject. It's only been a cool subject thanks to the kind of crypto, you know, community. And I've got a lot of time to debate these people. But in actual fact, I'd like to see payments become boring again. And I'd like to see payments become boring again by focusing on fixing the rails. In order, and the way you fix payments is you fix the digital identity, you fix the RTGS system, you fix the faster payment system, you fix the different elements of the fiat currency stack. And I'm concerned about, you know, this thing about the narrative. Some of the crypto stuff, they say the devil has got the best tunes. And that's true in the payment space. The crypto narrative is distorting the understanding of where we have to place our resources, and that's a frustration for me.
I think to your original question, where you're asking, what's the source of the problem? I think they're interrelated because I think, you know, what creates inefficiency is some of the things that you talk about where we really need to fix the fundamentals, and that is also then it manifests itself into excluding a large part of the population because with an inefficient system, it adds cost. And that makes it so that it becomes inaccessible to many. And so to me, you know, digitization is something that enabled more people to be included, and then fixing the inefficiencies and fixing the gaps will also make the cost of entry a lot lower, which will then make it accessible to many. And so I think they're all related.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think we project a lot of our frustration into whatever it may be, like crypto or whatever it may be. We say that's going to solve it all, and I think it's about being disciplined about separating what you're projecting into that vessel, right? And separating out a currency from a rail, and then stack ranking what you want to fix. I again fundamentally agree that like the rails itself, you know, we should be able to have a modern real-time payments infrastructure in the United States where you can move money between accounts and between institutions in real time. And we need to get off batch mainframe systems and move towards distributed microservices and real time and machine learning. And there's a little bit of a transformation that needs to take place. And be disciplined in saying that like there isn't going to be one technology that solves it, but being much more disciplined in avoiding conflation, stack ranking, and tackling the things that matter most.
Well, it seems like, I mean, I think if I to kind of weave it together, a lot of it is, to your point, Peggy, these things are all interrelated. That has to drive everyone in the ecosystem to work on this together. And then to your point, David, you can't solve everything. You need to start ranking, right? And then I think, Tony, to your point is, there's an element of both platform investment, but then also fixing underlying infrastructure, which is no longer necessarily a competitive differentiator, but really fix that part and then use that, then people can use that to then differentiate in other ways in how they deliver some of these services.
Absolutely.
Maybe pivoting then also, you know, we think about the FedNow announcement, we think about China talking about let's have a digital currency. we see now a little bit more of a, we'll say, active approach from central entities. Not so much about just always about defense and risk and protection, but how to even drive and accelerate the conversation around some of these topics. In your guys' opinion, what should really be the stance of not just your companies, but all payment players in regards to how to think about now kind of a new, stronger, more vocal role that we're seeing by some of the kind of public entities or central regulatory authorities?
Well, I mean, I think that first, I would say that we at PayPal always try and think about what the customer wants, right? And so what is happening with consumer behavior, what is happening in enabling us to support businesses to grow and to reach more and more customers globally. So I think it needs to start from there because that's going to drive the right solution. And I think that, governments across the world are seeing that what the evolution is in the way people transact and the way they want to live their lives, and the fact that businesses need instant access to cash operating globally, that consumers want to be able to sort of have their everyday financial lives in one place, one-stop shop, and able to do in whatever they're doing in their lives. And that is driving the desire for governments to create these standards. But I think payment companies need to play a central role in sort of absorbing some of that complexity and playing a role in ensuring that the regulations are doing just that. And rather than preventing it. And so I think that that's the role payments companies need to play in sort of, interpreting what that means in terms of what innovation needs to look like in the payment space, and then leading the way to enable and to partner with government entities to do that in a way that makes sense.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think I'm neutral in terms of the role of private versus public. All I really want is the problem to be addressed. And whatever advances the conversation, whatever advances our shared vocabulary, I want the solutions, I want the outcomes, and even if getting there is messy, that's acceptable.
Yeah, Zach, I'd love to see us having a kind of like central narrative about the way forward that everyone can rally around, being the governments and also the payments players. And I've made an attempt at putting something together in terms of a central narrative to fix the rails. It's a concept that we call fiat currency 2.0. I made a speech to the IMF last week on that topic. I'd be happy to share those remarks with anyone in the audience if you give me your business card afterwards or connect on LinkedIn. And if we have a central narrative way forward, which frankly is going to be based upon national currencies, right? I mean, it's kind of strange that one of the principal instruments of US power is the US dollar. It's kind of strange for American companies to be thinking about creating alternatives to the US dollar when that's an instrument of your power. So I think the central narrative forward is fixing our currencies, fixing our payment systems. Again, the whole banking industry is kind of clockwork and stuck in the 20th century. We've got to bring the rails and the banks into the 21st century. Look at what you can build on top of good rails. Look at Google Pay in India or WhatsApp Pay in India built on top of UPI.
Right.
If the US had an API, a UPI, Unified Payment Interface, these fintechs, big techs, and others could build incredible systems on top. So let's have a central narrative. Let's fix the rails and build that financial layer to the digital economy.
So, we're wrapping up. Unfortunately, we could probably talk about any of these topics for the rest of Cleveland's program this morning. But I think we really good conversation about where we see the trends going in terms of impacts on platforms, how to think about standards, how to think about the role of other entities, and how to understand some of the changes that are happening both around identity and the underlying infrastructure. Let's say we come back, the folks at Money2020 want us back here in 12 months. We're back on stage. What thing that we have not talked about that you think we would be talking about 12 months from now? Tony?
I hope in 12 months' time, again, for me, it's an interesting place because we're just debating the future of money. Should it be tokenized or should it be kind of like fiat currency? I hope people in 12 months' time appreciate the subtle genius of double entry bookkeeping.
Love it. David.
I'll keep this concise, which is there's a ton of going on. There's so many trends. It's hard to triangulate one thing that we should be talking about here and talking about in 12 months. I think the sage advice that I always go back to is understand who you serve. That's the one thing. Who do you serve and what do they need? And prioritize them and apply the learnings from the show here to that.
Peggy.
So I think the trend that we're going to see grow a lot in 2020 is social commerce. I think much like the focus on marketplaces and the growth in marketplaces, what we're seeing now is, we did a survey in PayPal where 1 in 3 consumers have done a social commerce transaction in the last year. And I think we're going to continue to see that evolution and growth and commerce happening through social commerce as a platform. And I think that that's going to be something we're going to see take off in
Excellent.
2020.
Well, moderator gets last word, and I'll just say I think we're going to see the changing value around cross-border payments. I think we're going to see the cost go down, and we're going to talk about what that actually looks like going forward. Tony, David, Peggy, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.